Welcome to the Better with Brock podcast. Today's episode is a powerful one. I sat down with the incredible Hattie Boydle, world champion athlete, coach, and someone who's faced some serious adversity that you may have never heard about. We dive into her harsh journey through an eating disorder, the grief she's faced as an individual, and how she's learned to embrace the lean stage physique, the off-season physique, and the human behind it. Not an easy balance. She also opens up about what she's changed her mind on when it comes to training and nutrition, and if she could only do 10 exercises for the rest of her life, what would they be? This interview, this conversation, this podcast is raw, it's honest, it's open, and it's an inspiring one as well. Let's jump into it. First of all, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Seen you, I've met you. This is first time actually properly meeting you. I've learned from you with you and Bass at the what was that, the strength seminar?
Train the female athlete.
Training the female athlete, yeah. I wanted to brush myself up on training the female athlete. Though I mostly train men, it was super helpful anyway. And you personally helped my squat a lot with the low bar squat because I didn't really do it.
Yeah, okay.
So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
But if anyone out there isn't aware of Hattie, which you probably should be, can you run through like how you got in fitness? How did it appear to you in your life? You've spoken about doing gymnastics before at a young age. Is that where it started?
Yeah, so I often reflect back on like the whole journey that I've had or the evolution that I've had from like a physical aspect, but also where a lot of my characteristics come from. And I was really lucky that my parents put me into gymnastics when I was like 4 years old. You know, and as any adult does or any parent does, you go chuck your kid over there and you're like, all the best. And it just so happened that I became quite good at it. And by the age of 12, I was doing 32 hours a week of gymnastics. Wow. That was before and after school, 8 hours on the weekend. I would go to and from, Sydney to Canberra to the AIS and do all the tryouts for the Commonwealth Games and all those Olympic squads at such a young age, at 12. Like they pick them when they're so young to obviously train them towards being, a great gymnast at such an early age because the career is so short. And that kind of gave me just a taste of not just competitiveness, but how to essentially follow a plan. To the practice mindset, practicing skills. In order for me to get from level 1 to level 2, I had to accomplish a certain amount of skills to be able to do that. And so that sport as well led me to so many other sports. Like I did soccer, I did bloody netball, volleyball, swimming, acrobats. Like it really gave me a lot of skill sets to be athletic, not great at everything, but kind of like a jack of all trades at such an early age. Where fitness in terms of the gym came into my life, funny enough, but not so funny, I have a history of an eating disorder. And it wasn't till I got out of hospital and my sister took me out night clubbing, funny enough, when I was...
So how old are you?
I'm 36 now, but then I was 17. And the security guards, who were all into bodybuilding, because they're big boys, were like, the first thing they said was like, what do you do to your calves? And I'm like, I ran a lot at that time. And they were like, have you ever done weight training? And they took me to the gym for the first time. I mean, I'd been to the gym to do aerobic stuff. We had to go to the gym for school, but I never really got into it. But they were the ones that like really started to get me into, using the machines and taking me to the gym to practice weight training. And that's where I really kind of like fell in love with what it felt like to train for something outside of gymnastics. And so when I was sick as well, I kind of was in hospital and I'm like, what can I do with my life that helps women recognize that thing that we're doing here is not the way to be? And so when I got out of hospital, I was introduced to the weights area, but I also started my PT course. And so when I was 17, like a couple of months before I turned 18, I did my course, and 2 days after I turned 18, I started working at Fitness First. And I was really lucky. I don't know if you know Nadia Norman. Nadia Norman has been in this industry, the fitness industry, for, I don't know, like over 20 years. She was one of my teachers at AIF, and she put me forward to work at the Fitness First, the first ever Black Label Fitness First in Sydney, the bougie one. And I was also really lucky that at that time, I was around really smart people, and essentially I was like the weak link. They were like, oh, better work on her because like she's the one that's letting the team down. Like they wanted to be like the best club or the best trainers. And so I had a lot of mentorship from a really early stage of my career as a personal trainer. And then that was when I was 18. I'm 36 now, so I've been in the industry for a really long time.
Did you enjoy being a face-to-face personal trainer?
I did. I was a face-to-face personal trainer for 8 years. 8 years before I went online.
At the Black Label Fitness First?
5 years there, 3 years in a mix between, I think it was like a sports centre, and then I moved to PCYC.
So just to backtrack a little bit, what, if you don't mind sharing, can you talk about what kind of landed you? You've shared before, you were 26 kilos. What landed you at that place? Just because I have a history of an eating disorder. It wasn't as extreme as yours. I wasn't hospitalized, but I was in a binge eating cycle, like starve, overeat for about 3 years while I was a personal trainer. So I had this like personal feeling of being a fraud because I was coaching people, getting successful transformations with people, but also going home and stuffing my face and being like, track your calories, guys. Make sure you track your calories. And I'm like eating McDonald's, eating pizzas, smashing chocolate slabs just for no reason, really, out of something that I felt like I couldn't overcome. So what was your journey like to get to that place?
It's such an interesting one because it's not like people look at anorexia, which is what I suffered, as a control thing. And I remember so vividly, like a couple of months before the deterioration of my mental state, I actually saw someone on the internet or on TV who had anorexia. And I remember saying to my mum, oh, I could never do that. I love food too much. And the thing is, it's not actually about food. And so what had happened is I was 16 years old. I was experiencing death of a friend, and I'd never experienced that before. And my understanding of it, this is my own understanding, is that when that all happened and it felt so out of control, I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, life can be taken away so quickly. And then I was like, I'm going to do everything that I can to be the best version of myself. I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to watch what I eat. I'm going to get into a good university. And I just drove up this like really high expectation of what I was going to do. And in my mind, it felt like I was doing the right thing. It felt like it was like, I'm going to take life by my hands and I'm just going to make the most out of it, because I was like, oh my God, this thing is just so like just taken out of someone's hands so quickly. And so it was probably my way of trying to control life, because I was like so scared of it being out of control that, you know, some good things happened. I started studying and I started being really good at school, and you know the teachers were like, what the hell is going on? But I started to control things too much. And so I started earning the right to do certain things. So I had to study a certain amount before I could go do the exercise, or I had to do this amount of exercise before I could go eat. And then it became more and more and more and more. So I often talk about, I applied progressive overload. I had to do more than what I did the day before, but it's not the progressive overload that is healthy in the form that we talk about these days. And I started to control my food. I had no education around food. I just read whatever I did in Vogue magazines, which was incredibly unhealthy.
I was going to say, that's not the best magazine to look for nutrition advice.
And I was like obsessed with that time around like fashion TV. I was watching these models, which I'm never going to look like. I now know. And I was just like, you know, it suddenly became an obsession, but it was also around like the need to control everything around me. And I remember I was like, okay, I want to get really good grades. And I started staying after school and studying, and I worked with my teacher to put together this speech. And we had to do this presentation, and unfortunately I got a teacher who at that time really didn't like me. And I remember being so nervous. I'm like, oh my God, this woman, is not really fond of me. And I was doing my speech and she failed me. And from that moment, I said to myself, well, no matter what you do, you're just not good enough. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, you're just a failure.
Because you gave it your all.
Because I gave my all. And so that put me down to this absolute spiral of needing to earn everything. And that's where I just deteriorated in every type of way. And I just formed really deep depression. It wasn't actually about like food. It was like, because I felt so terrible, it was like I anchored to being in control of like absolutely everything. And it just got incredibly, unhealthy. And I learned a lot from that person. I definitely learned I can be very disciplined. But I also learned that the relationship that we have with ourselves sets the tone for everything. And so to hit rock bottom, which you probably have your own experience of, that is a place where we either come to the position where it's like, okay, I am wholly responsible for where I am in this moment. And I almost have to be wholly responsible for getting myself out. The only reason I went to hospital was because my mum was meant to go away with her dad, who just recovered from cancer. And she was like, I can't go, I've got to look after you. And I immediately felt so selfish. And I was like, Mum, I will go to hospital if you go away with your dad. And it was the only thing that was going to be the reason for her to go look after her dad, who really wanted to go and experience life after being so sick. And it was probably the perfect catalyst, because I don't think I would have gone into hospital until I was forced to go into hospital. But then the day after I was in the first initial like daycare of the eating disorder clinic, I fell into like a coma from being fed too much food. My body wasn't used to it. I hadn't eaten more than, half an apple and, a little bit of milk for like so long. And then I had to be hospitalised, and that's where I was in intensive care for a week before being transferred back into being a in-person clinic. Yeah.
That's such a story. So what would you say to someone if they, like, that's a pretty specific situation, so they may not be in that situation, but what would you say to someone that is, I guess, going through a tough time or trying to get control of nutrition or just of their life, going through tough things, like you've been surrounded by loss, let's say, or like death in some way. How would you recommend that they would deal with that?
I think grief is it's quite beautiful, and it's also really tough. Like when we grieve someone's loss. And I think the first thing is like, give yourself grace. We always try and make sense of everything, and in ways we try and control the uncontrollable. It can be both a healthy thing and an unhealthy thing. And I think when a lot of the emotions kind of settle, to zoom out and ask yourself, how would I like to live? Nowadays, when I'm faced with death, one, I have more experience of it because it's happened more often, and I've learned from the original experience of how not to do things. It actually reminds me of how important it is to live the life that you want to live. And so I look at death, which is really difficult and very sad, and say, well, thank you for showing me that what I have right now is so important and so beautiful and hard at the same time, because being a human is challenging. We have all these incredible emotions that feel so deeply, and sometimes it's deep joy and sometimes it's deep sadness. And we need to experience both of them to experience what life is. And so if you can, when you are faced with grief and sadness and someone, where it be even a breakup in relationship, like to mourn the experience, but also be grateful for the experience because of everything that we've learned from that person or from that thing. What can we take forward with us and use it as a tangible skill set or tool, or even just a beautiful memory, and say, well, in this moment, I'm still here. And what an opportunity it is for me to take action on things that are important to me. So often we have to have a breakdown before we have a breakthrough, or we need to have a shift in perspective. And for me, death now is like that little shift in perspective that goes, gosh, what an honor it is to grow old. What an honor it is to be here in this moment and be worthy of the challenges that I'm facing in this moment, which we often try and move away from. And can we find joy in the challenge? So that's probably my perspective that I've taken now, which I wish I had in that moment back then. But I had to go through that hard time to kind of reach the pivoting point of where, how I experience death now.
It's hard to do that when you're younger too, because you don't have that framework to kind of bounce off. I have a similar story, kind of. When I was 12, my mum passed away. Oh. And I didn't have any sort of framework, right? I was like 12 years old, like super young. And that's why I was interested in hearing what you have to say, like when you deal with that stuff. Because what I did something that I would actually recommend to people, but there was definitely some things that I didn't do the best. But one thing that I did was like, at the time I was into music. My dad taught me how to play guitar. And I was into singing. Just because my dad was like, he would sing from 4 a.m. till 5:30 a.m. before he went and drove trucks for 12 hours, and he would just do so I was around music 24/7.
Yeah,
so in some way that was like an expression for me. So I wrote songs about losing mum. And that was actually really cathartic. So that actually really helped. So if there was any way that someone was going through something that they could, I guess, channel that energy in a productive way, as opposed to a destructive way. If you're looking at, let's say, I don't know, alcohol or, doing reckless things. I was fortunate enough to really find that exciting. So I really dived into music. Another thing that I had, which was a couple years later, which was really helpful, was older people around me. So I had my dad and my brother. So I was fortunate enough to be the younger sibling. So I had wiser people around me. But also it's losing someone, like my brother lost his mother, my dad lost his wife. And we all deal with it differently. So in another way, it's all new to us, so we didn't really know. But they had more years, like you're saying, if you're older, you've kind of been through it a bit more, you've failed a bit more, you've gone through a bit more mistakes that you may have made. So that was super helpful to kind of bounce off. We would cry together and, all that kind of stuff. But it's a tricky thing, and I feel that as a young person, it's super hard to come to grips with because it doesn't really make sense. And I wanted to know if someone is younger, or like what would you kind of like say to your younger self going through that, like that now. I know you said like having a perspective is cool, like, try to be grateful for the opportunity, but that's very hard when you've lost, like I lost my mum. I'm super now, obviously I'm not stoked that it happened. No. But I look back at it and I can see how that turned me into who I am today. So that in some way makes me grateful for the hardship, not the situation, but the hardship. Like I would prefer a different hardship, but that has, that has made me disciplined. I appreciate life more. And that encouraged me to have this confidence, or kind of in some ways like stupidity, to think that like I could change the world, because I was like, I just don't care anymore, because like my mum, it just came out of nowhere, you know what I mean? It was like, so I was just like, screw this, man. Like, why would I just play it safe, or why would I just do nothing? So what would you say to like a young 12-year-old, or like, I don't know how old you were going through that. Like, how would you try and turn it around?
Well, I think with that question, like even as you were just sharing, you losing your mum at 12, I thought to myself, oh my God, what would I be like if I lost my mum? Yeah. And it's easier to say that when there's no emotion around. I think the only thing that I could probably share is let yourself feel everything. Let yourself feel everything first. And then when the dust settles, ask yourself, like possibly like, how can I, or what things do I need to do to be okay with what's happened? And remind myself of, always have my mother with me, always have this person with me, and how would they be proud of me? And again, it's so hard, it's so hard for me to, it feels like so hard for me to say what someone should be like, because I don't even know what I would be like losing my mum, because she's someone that's so close to me. I know that I would definitely cry a lot. Yeah. I know that I would probably take a lot of experience that I have and kind of tie that into, would my mum be proud of me, or I wish my mum would be here. And I think it's like always doing our best to let it be about love versus the like why me kind of thing.
Victimhood.
Yeah, victimhood. But it's so easy for me to say that because I'm sitting
Yeah.
on the other side and I've got my mum here.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about that specific situation, but yeah, I know. It's kind of like a helpless situation. Like it's definitely not something where you go, all right, I'm just going to be composed and go through this, like it's a mess. But I definitely think one thing that I was grateful for was no one was ashamed to feel whatever they were feeling, so that helped because now I can talk about it and I'm not crying or, obviously it's sad, but it's not like I'm a mess because I've spent years crying, up until now,
I'm good now.
I'm good. From 12 to 18, it was like a bit of a messy time, but anyway, I kind of want to let's transition a bit with yourself being such a acclaimed competitor. And I know a lot of women go through this and men too. I've been talking a lot to people that I work with about being lean, right? And quite a lot I'll say, what do you want to look like or where do you want to be from here because you want to change now, that's why we're talking type of thing. And they'll be like, well, I want to be, how I was 3 years ago or 4 years ago. I was actually talking about this with my wife yesterday. I was like, man, if I competed, I don't think, I recently just lost a couple kilos because I had a baby and I was just eating too much, whatever, not sleeping
Comfort
enough, blah,
eating.
blah, blah. Yeah, all that type of stuff. And I was like, oh man, I want to just lean down a bit. But I think if I competed, that would be on another level and I would struggle with that, looking at stage photos and being like, whoa, I was 6%, 8%, whatever. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I've been competing since I was 21, so 15 years that I've kind of learned a lot of the lessons that I've needed to not just think about how I am in this moment, but what's going to support me for my future goals. And the thing that I had to learn was to separate how I looked all the time from what is needed to be done to build my future body. Because when I first started competing, that wasn't my ideal body. And even as I'm 36 now, this still isn't my ideal body. I'm still working on that. And I think the piece that a lot of people struggle with is we become so attached to this idea of this one thing. And not only are we so much more than our bodies, but the phases that are required for physical change, whether that be to improve our body composition, requires times where we might be a little bit uncomfortable. We might not be in this ideal state, but that is not forever. And so it's important to get really clear on what is the purpose of what we need to do? What is the purpose of each phase? And also respecting what is needed for each stage. So I've been 6% body fat and I've been 14% body fat, and there's still, 14% body fat's relatively low numbers, I must admit
That's
that.
putting up a good number still
Yes.
for an off-season.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the thing I'm most grateful for, Brock, is when I'm in a build, I couldn't give a shit about body fat accumulating. My most important thing is, am I building the muscle? Because that's the thing that takes a lot of time to do. And I think there's a massive misunderstanding around what is actually required of us to build muscle. We actually shouldn't get fat in a building phase. That means you've disrespected some part of the process. And I think a really beautiful journey for everyone to go on is learning to make small commitments to ourselves, learning how to follow a process, learning how to respect a process, and learning how to do hard things even when we don't want to do it. And isn't that the epitome of discipline? So one, I unattach myself to how I look. One, because how I look on stage is not how I'm going to look forever. And obviously I've been through this experience, but a lot of the images that we look at on social media, they take a lot of work to maintain there. So unless you're willing to forego social outings, a very, a fun relationship with your partner or even your family, and you really want to isolate yourself and be very tied to a structure that is incredibly rigid, it's not where you're going to be the happiest. And we often hear this all the time. You might be like, well, I was leaner then, but I actually wasn't happy. And that's because there's a disconnect between what is going to give you fulfillment and what you see on the other side. And often, or more times than not, there's just too much of an extreme barrier that's getting you to what you think you want to look like. And sometimes we have to go there to realize maybe it's not what we want, or is there a better way to achieve that particular look? And the more times that we can add a little bit more muscle under the belt, which takes time and years, getting to our dream physique gets easier later because we've also learned how to do the process better. We've got more experience and we've got a little bit more time under our belt. So right now I'm in a build. I'm getting a DEXA scan tomorrow and I'm really curious as to how much muscle I put on. But yeah, clothes fit a little bit tighter, but I'm like, whatever. I just don't really, I'm grateful that it's not my sole purpose. My sole purpose is train with intent, look after my sleep, add progressive overload, train, to proximity to failure and outperform myself every week and let that over time, like see the small, very small, subtle improvements over time to get me to where I want to be for my next show.
So how do you sell that to someone that doesn't understand that yet? Because I go through that, you go through that on a daily basis. I'd love to hear what your process is. It's kind of like turning that around because they want to look leaner. They want to I want to build muscle and lose fat, right? And that isn't you don't just do that most of the time. It's has to be a cyclical process. But how do you go around selling them on that idea? Because they usually don't want to hear it, right? And then you're this coach that told them that they don't want to hear, and then they'll go to someone that sells them the dream. It's just full of bullshit. And then they're like, oh, and then they come back 3 months later. You're like, oh, I told you. How do you change their mind around that?
Well, one of the questions I ask my clients is, what do you make that mean? And what I'm referring to is when they say, well, then I'm going to put on body fat. It's like, cool. So what do you make that mean? And they'll be like, when they say it out loud, it's like, well, I just feel uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, so why is that important? Like, how is that changing your life, this discomfort that you have? And they'll share whatever it is. I'm like, is this the worst thing in the world that's going to happen to you? Like, no, but it's like, okay, so this thing that you want over here, right? And where you are now, the disconnect is your ability to remove yourself from this little bit of discomfort and follow through on these other things that are going to give you empowerment, like learning how to be okay with more food, learning how to outperform yourself. So something that we teach in Train the Female Athlete is how to outperform yourself week to week, how to get strong, right? How to maximize your own training potential. Like, can we look at this path in a different perspective and not make it just about body fat? Because at the end of the day, if we remove all of the feelings, it's just a little bit of body fat. It actually doesn't mean anything other than the story that you've made it mean. So we can actually change that story, and we can actually come to learn that it isn't as bad as what we imagined it to be. And guess what? When we reach this point over here, fat loss is really easy. And so while it might have taken you 10 months to build a kilo of muscle, it's going to take you 10 weeks to lose any fat the difference is so big. And, a really common thing that a lot of people say is, muscle weighs more than fat. That's not true. Pound for pound, gram for gram, kilo for kilo, it weighs the same. But the circumference of how much surface level it takes up on the body is really different. And so that 1 kilo of muscle that you've worked really, really hard to increase, you're not necessarily going to see visually until you do the fat loss phase, but you have to go through that phase first. And so I try and teach my clients, follow my process. Trust me, trust yourself, respect the process, and we're going to go through this as slowly as what we need to. So I generally start people at maintenance, and in that maintenance phase, we make sure that training effort is there, because we know that if training effort, and we're not like the training effort is a stimulus for growth. So for anyone listening, for anyone that does, okay, last set, best set, and then the other 2 sets were essentially warm-up sets, you're not going to grow your body, okay? All sets have to be hard. We should actually see a drop-off of reps per set as the accumulation of fatigue sets in because you've given so much effort to the set before. That's what true training intensity is. And so that maintenance phase is, let's get clear on what's actually keeping you the same in terms of your calorie intake. You're showing me that you can follow a process. You show me that you've got a good relationship with your food here. You've shown me that you're training hard. We're seeing really good training effort and intensity. Okay, now we can pull the trigger and increase your calories just a little bit. Like literally for some people, it's like 150 grams a day, 150 calories a day. Some people it's up to 500, depending on the individual that I'm working with. But it is as slow as what we need to, because if you don't trust me, you're not trusting the process. And I think a really important piece here, if you're anyone that wants to build your body and you're scared, I highly recommend that you work with a coach, someone that you can trust, because it's nice to have someone on the other side that you can say, I'm struggling a little bit. Can you help me? And your coach will go as slow or as fast as you need to get the job done.
I think one of the biggest things also is just this big gap of education or this big gap of knowledge. Like they don't necessarily know how to do a bulk, or they don't even like that word. You know, it sounds like they just get fat and then they just have to cut and panic cut because, I've gained too much fat. But I think like actually just zero knowledge in terms of what it actually takes just makes them scared because they don't know. Like they think it's just eating a ton of food, maybe eating a lot of processed food, maybe eating a lot of takeout. Like they kind of see these bodybuilders online, well, especially men, you know, they'll look at people like Sam Sulek and stuff and be like, oh, you know, milk and, you know, chocolate milk and cereal and kind of just like jamming stuff in. But you're right. It's so like minimal, the amount of calories that you need to actually gain. And if you are getting like super fat, it's because you're just eating too much. Like there's just this small thing. Like, yeah, you can literally like if you're gaining 1% of your body weight per month, which is kind of like ideal for a bulk, then you want to like, yeah, you can lose 1% of body weight per week. And it's not that challenging, like 0.5 to 1%, you know, if you want to kind of get technical, but it's literally months to weeks. So, you know, you bulk for 6 months, cut for 6 weeks, you're ultimately the same person, but with more muscle. They don't understand that. And it's not super rocket science, but just having that understanding, I feel, has made a big change to the way that like my clients and people I talk to perceive a bulk. It's not as scary.
I mean, there's so many people that have done it wrong.
Yeah.
And this is
myself
where I think
included.
I think we all I think everyone does something wrong initially. And that's why I'm saying there's such a big misunderstanding of what's actually expected of us in a building phase. And I love my builds now. Well, this has been the most challenging build. I'm eating 3,100 calories a day, 62 kilos. That's amazing. The most amount I've eaten at this body weight. Normally I'm about 2 kilos heavier. And it's been really challenging getting food in because I'm just not hungry. So I don't rely on hunger cues at the moment. I rely on my phone to say
strict schedule,
time to eat. Otherwise I could go through so many hours without eating, mostly because it feels like such a chore at the moment, which is such a first world problems thing, but it's actually what can happen. And it's probably my first experience of this, and I've been doing this for 15 years. But I think there's such a misunderstanding around what is actually required for a build. And we know now that we can build muscle on around maintenance calories. This is not everyone, this is some people, especially if you have low training age and you haven't had much intensity and you're just starting to train with intensity, you can actually get some lovely recomposition. But it's not going to stay like that forever. At some point, we do have to increase calories. And as you just named, it doesn't have to be a lot. The hard thing on the internet is we see people like me and other people going, they're eating 3,000 calories. It's taken me 15 years to eat 3,000 calories. I can assure you when I first started building, it wasn't that much. It was 2,200, right? And
that's super high.
Yeah, that's high, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't have to do that. That's not where you have to be. And in the same way that we have strategies around fat loss, right? We have a deficit, we have our protein, fats and carbs, we have our training, we have our sleep, we have our steps. The same goes with your nutrition and your process for building muscle. It does not change. So I often say the process never changes. From my fat loss phase to my weight maintenance to my build, I do the same things. I train with intensity, I sleep, I have recovery days, I track my nutrition, and I add progressive overload. Your training is the stimulus, your nutrition is the anabolic window, and sleep wraps everything together. And nothing should change from process to process, from stage to stage. And if we can focus on being process driven, which is what I need to do every single day, versus what is the outcome? When I step on the scale tomorrow, what is it? That result there doesn't make this thing over here, which is actually going to get you the result, any better. So the goal is, instead of doing more, can we refine what we're doing? Can I do what's in front of me at the best of my ability? Can I do the basics really well? And then I can add any bell and whistle after that. And that comes down to, you know, whether it be our training, whether it be our nutrition, whether it be like even the smallest increase in sleep is going to have a compounding effect on your body composition.
Yeah, I think it's like what you're talking about there is like habit formation, like making those processes habit. And then, like the only thing that really changes is the amount of calories that you have between a bulk and a cut. And it's not like you do this bulk program or this like fat loss 6-week special program and, you know, throw in all this cardio and like do this kind of emergency stuff, which I think people are like, oh, I need to do lots of high reps now. You know, I need to get shredded. You know, it's like, what are we trying to do here? It's all about habit formation, I think. Like making progressive overload a habit, making training intensity a habit, maybe being aware of RIR and RPE and stuff like that. And I think that's where a good coach comes into play, like yourself. I wanted to do this little segment that Chris Williamson did. I love it. I've loved watching it on YouTube. So if there were 10 exercises that you could do for the rest of your life in order for you to have the body that you want, the strength that you want, the look or the feeling that you want to have in your body, what would these 10 exercises be?
Seated hamstring curl for sure, overlying. So seated hamstring curl.
Okay, and why?
Has a better stimulus for hypertrophy. Then I would do, I love the glute drive. I'm a massive fan of the glute drive.
I did that on Saturday actually when Tony was try to get my glutes ready for Tony. Is that just because the barbell hip thrust is just like so annoying to set up?
Oh, so annoying, but just
Especially
the glute drive it just feels better. The strength curve, especially if I'm going to be really specific, the Nautilus glute drive is my favorite. Just feels so good.
So you got hammies and glutes done.
Dumbbell RDLs. Dumbbell RDLs over a barbell RDL, I think.
Do you want lifting straps with that?
Lifting straps, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then I am normally I love squatting, but I also really love the hack squat.
I see a lot of you I
think I'll
your
throw
stories
hack squat.
are you're using the hack squat a lot.
Yeah, because I can go to failure on there safely and effectively.
Yeah. So are you going super deep? Are you going to halfway?
I'll go as low as my mobility allows.
And what's that currently at? Because you got some lower back things going on.
Yeah, so I've got 3 herniated discs. And a part of that is like a combination of I didn't rehab an injury on my right foot from 2015 very well. And I ended up doing a lot of training in this boot and it just restricted a lot of my mobility. And so I've got different range of motions from my left to my right foot. And that over time.
Does that make you shift in the squat to one side?
Yeah. Yeah. And also all the posing that I do for my comps, it's just like so much more rotation to one side. So I'm like getting extension and rotation. And that was just really pissing off my L4 and L5. And then, of course, I was loading it. So bit of a recipe for disaster there. I still love squatting and deadlifting, but if I was to do things for the rest of my life, I would, and I'm trying to stay injury-free, I would probably stay mostly on machine-based because you're just so much more stability and then I can just get as strong as I can on those movements. Then I would do...
So we're 4 in now.
We're 4 in. For my mid-back, I'd go a semi-pronated, probably chest-supported row for my mid-back.
Machine.
For lats, to be honest, I would actually go with a straight arm rope pull down so that it isolates my lats. Otherwise, I've got the tendency for like my teres to overwork. And I personally don't like having bigger arms, so I'll try and do more back movements with a straight arm so that I don't get the bicep.
So do you prefer this is just out of curiosity, do you prefer the rope over a straight bar with the straight arm rope pull down?
Yeah, I do, because you can play with hand position and I get way more range. So
yeah, or else the bar hits your hips.
Yeah, so I definitely prefer that and it feels pretty good. Then I love dumbbell lateral raises, but I also love a lying cable lateral raise.
Okay, so which way are you lying?
I like a slight incline. So you face, obviously you've got the cables in front of you.
You're facing in towards them.
Yeah,
and you're coming in like that.
Yeah. So I love that.
I can't set that up over there. It's a bit tight. Like over there, like because the bench has to go out a bit, right? I'd have to break that glass window. But I know what you mean. Yeah. I do a similar thing facing out. Like I set them up hip-height behind the back.
That's nice.
Yeah.
But I just get a little bit too much trap. Lying down is going to take out the trap.
Yeah,
so
nice.
For anyone that wants to get less trap in your dumbbell or your lateral work, then either go face down or supinated and it will take out the trapezius. You'll be able to just work the deltoids in isolation.
Yeah. I think that's 7.
7. And then I also love an incline dumbbell chest press.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't do much pressing at the moment. To be honest, majority of my training at the moment is lower body dominant because personally for me, for the body that I enjoy being in, I don't like I say this now and I've got like massive shoulders.
I don't like being jacked.
I don't like a really big upper body for females, for myself. You know, everyone's free to look the way they want to look, and there's some incredible physiques out there with much bigger upper bodies than me, but how I like to live. So I do 3 lower body days, 1 back day. And my back day has like snatch grip deadlifts and straight arm pull downs to hit the lats but not have the bicep in there. Last 2 exercises. Ooh, what else do I? You know what? And this is just again lower body because I love lower body. I'm a massive fan at the moment of a supported Bulgarian split squat.
I've seen you doing that.
Yeah, really enjoy that at the moment.
So why do you enjoy that over, let's just say, like a standard holding your dumbbells?
I can get a better position in my torso, like for bracing, because it's supported, and I just seem to be able to put my back or my core in a better position, and I don't get any back pain, and I can go really heavy on it. So it just at the moment feels like a really nice unilateral exercise for me.
Yeah.
9. Last one, face pulls. Face pulls with some external rotation for rotator cuff health, shoulder health, and also the mid back.
Right. Okay, so let's recap. Just so to make sure we got 10. We got seated leg curl.
Glute drive on the Nautilus.
Glute drive, hack squat.
There was also dumbbell Romanian deadlift.
Dumbbell RDL, yeah. Then you moved
chest
to the
supported.
upper body. Chest supported seated row machine.
In semi-pronated.
Semi-super shivers. Was that 5 or 6? I lost count. I think that was 6.
Straight arm pull down.
Straight arm pull down with a rope.
Yep. Dumbbell lateral raise.
Was it? No, you wanted
I like both.
You got to choose one.
Okay. Lying cable.
So lying cable, that was 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then
face pull and
face pull, then
Bulgarian.
You had another leg one. Nice. I like it. That's very lower body focused.
Yeah, and I could definitely develop my whole lower body on those exercises and could maintain my upper body on those.
That's great. So you wouldn't no incline dumbbell chest press.
Oh, we missed that one too.
Well, we're at 10 now. Do you want to do a sub or do you want to keep it at? You want to get that shelf, the upper chest shelf?
I mean, I don't need it so much. I'll have to forego that one. Damn it.
Yeah. So you got no presses.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
okay.
not a very balanced approach to us.
No, Tony won't be happy with that.
No, neither will Bass.
Let's talk about, well, we're still on training, but what's one thing that you've changed your mind on with training, let's say recently?
Yeah, great question. Less is more. And one of the things that I teach a lot of my clients is how to train with better intent. Because volume is a tool that we use when we don't have strength or intensity as a skill set yet. So often when we're a beginner, we might use things like high reps because we need repetition. But to be more advanced, we need to develop the skill of intensity. And when we look at intensity, we think about the effort that's being applied every single rep to each set on the muscle. And, you know, I used to train 7 days a week, and then it moved to 6, then moved to 5, and now it's 4. And honestly, 99% of my clients all train 4 days a week now because I look at the work to rest ratio. So we've got 4 days of work, 3 days of rest. And again, in the beginning, 5 days was good because we didn't have the intensity, but I teach my clients intensity. And the goal is to get the most out of the least. More is just more. Better is better. And so when we look at better, it's can we get more bang for buck per rep per set and be able to walk out the gym? So volume is probably the thing that I've changed my mind on in terms of can we get the most out of the least and getting my clients to train less but more effectively. I couldn't even imagine going back to training 5 days a week, not with the intensity that I push these days. The second one around, did you ask me around nutrition? My idea around nutrition?
That's next, but I want to just kind of talk to that a little bit because I've had the same trajectory, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that like I'm not a pro bodybuilder or anything. I just train and just, I just train because I love it. But I've gone from like I was doing 14 sessions a week when I was a PT. I think it was just because I was in the gym, so.
You're doing twice a day, 7 days a week?
I was.
Okay.
So when I first started, back in 2015 to 2017, that was my routine. I was like, yeah, let's get jacked. So I was super excited about it. I was just, and I actually enjoy training. Like, it's not a chore for me, you know, like I'm grateful that, you know, some people are like, oh, I have to drag my ass to the gym, right? I was stoked. And since I worked there, it was almost worse because it's like, if someone canceled or if I ate my lunch and then I had nothing to do, I was like, I'm going to go train arms. You know, I'm going to go do calves and abs or do forearms. I'll just do anything. So I would do 14 sessions a week, and I'd like, you know, wear that on my chest, super proud. And then I was constantly having niggles like in my lower back, always sore. I'd like me and my mates had a joke because he'd be like, oh, what are you training today? And I'd be like kind of like feel, I'd like feel,
not my spine.
Yeah, I was like, what's not sore, you know? I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse until one day I actually had like a muscle spasm in my lower back and I fainted at home because I was like so much pain in my lower back. It was a good learning curve. So then I was like, okay, I'll go down to just 7, you know, like not 14, not 2 a day. I'll just do it every day. And then eventually I went down to 6 and then I went to 5. Now I'm at 4. Ever since I had my second kid, I was like, time-wise, it's a bit rough. But then also I couldn't, like you, 5 was just a little bit tough. And I think that goes to, I don't think, you know, proportionally I'm as strong as you, but, you know, as you get stronger, you have, like, man, you're pushing bigger numbers.
Yeah. You need more recovery.
It beats you up, not just on a muscular level, but your joints need to recover as well.
Nervous system.
And I was finding, like my nerve system, I was just a bit fried. And then for work, you sit down to work, you're like, I don't even know, like can't think straight because you're just so fried everywhere. So now I'm down to 4 as well. And I feel like I'm getting the best results, especially in terms of strength, because I'm actually recovered.
Yeah.
And I can give it more. And I'm doing like 3 sets on things. But before I was like 5 sets or 6 by 6. Let's go, you know? It's such a journey.
There's 2 things I want to touch on there. And I just want to backtrack to something you said, which is, I love training. And that's an excuse or a comment that is, you know, I'm often faced with women when I'm like, hey, I'm just going to drop your training back. Or like, why are you doing so much? Just out of curiosity. And they're like, well, I love training. I'm like, that's cool. But do you love results even more? Because, you know, and I work with a lot of women. I work with men and women now, but mostly women. And I often say women are the hardest workers in the room, often to the detriment of their own results. Because the thing we won't do is, should I do less? It's always, I'm not changing, I should do more. And like I said, more is just more. More is not better. And people, again, have a misunderstanding around training is, you know, by nature actually catabolic. We break down in training. That's what stimulates that inflammation response. That's what drives all the nutrients to that muscle to start to repair it. So during training, we are stressing the body. Good, healthy stress. Very good for us. But what happens after that is going to determine whether we are going to repair, whether we are putting money back into the bank, right, the muscle bank. And so if we're just consistently taking out money, and never putting the money back in, then we're just in debt. And so when we weight train, we are putting our body into a little bit of debt. And then we eat, but also the days of recovery. So the days that we don't do any training, and I'm even referring to this thing that we call active recovery, which we always want to label something just for our excuse to go do some exercise, right?
I'm being productive.
No.
I'm doing something.
A full rest day where you might only get your steps that day, guess what? That is the day that your body can actually recover from the high effort you gave yesterday in preparation for the high effort you're going to give tomorrow. And so learning how to train more effectively through learning how to lean into the discomfort of uncomfortable sets is the thing that's actually going to help build your body quicker and better and take up less time, more time for other things that are important to you. That doesn't mean you don't love training. Trust me, we all love training, but we even love training more when we can see the results, when we feel stronger, because fatigue masks effort. And even though it feels hard today, if your performance has dropped, that is the key marker to say you are under-recovered. So we often look at HRV and all these other things. It's like, that isn't the clear sign that you're under-recovered. But a drop in performance is the sign. And the goal is to continue to outperform yourself every single week so that you can keep building these wonderful things called muscle.
Yeah, I love it. What's one thing you've changed your mind on with nutrition?
One thing I've changed my mind on with nutrition. Funny enough, I don't have too much of a change in mind of nutrition. I think it's been pretty solid for a long period of time. Obviously, the priority of protein. I think the thing that I've actually shined a little bit more light on lately is the importance of each macronutrient. So we often do a song and dance about how important protein is. Yes, protein is really important when it comes to maintaining body composition for our health, not just from a skeletal muscle tissue point of view, but even like just cells and the nervous system and hair, skin and nails. So protein is probably the macronutrient that most people are not scared of, but I still think could do a better job of getting into their diet, particularly women. Now there's so much more research on, the higher amounts of protein for women, particularly as we age, but also the more active that you are is also really important. Also having a double serving of protein before bed can help prolong that protein muscle synthesis response, while we're sleeping. So that's really important when it comes to anyone that's in a calorie deficit. We want to make sure that we're having a really nice chunk of protein before we go to bed. And also making sure we're sandwiching our protein and carbohydrates, around that peri-workout window. So the peri-workout window is the meal before training and the meal after training. So I call it like the sandwich. And why it's important to have carbohydrates and proteins in that peri-workout window is because they're going to support the demand of that catabolic or anabolic response from training. So it's both protein is obviously anabolic, training is catabolic, but that carbohydrate and the protein is going to kind of protect that response or protect the muscle from going into that debt, what I was talking about before.
So they're kind of like deposits into
deposits. So if you think of your muscle like a bank account, every time we exercise, every time we train, we take a deposit out. When we sleep, when we have a day of recovery, when we have food, we are putting credit back in. And essentially what we want to try and do is always be at least in maintenance or a little bit over. Now, the body is always going into protein muscle synthesis or protein muscle breakdown. We're going to have this balance. Actually, we need this for the stimulus. However, we want to do our best efforts to support muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. Okay. So your nutrition essentially creates that anabolic window or that anabolic environment for that to do so. That's protein. Carbohydrates, why they're so important. I always look at carbohydrates as being like one of the best macronutrients for manipulating body composition, right? There's such a misunderstanding around carbohydrates.
So much fear.
And that's because when people eat carbohydrates, we store some water with that in the muscle, which is considered lean body tissue. So when you get a DEXA scan, they're actually reading off how much glycogen and water is being held in the muscle. And then it looks at your bone. And then the remaining is essentially your fat mass. So the more carbohydrate and water that you store in the muscle, the better it is from like a body composition reading. But also carbohydrates are great for performance. So obviously carbohydrates drive performance, which is crucial for changing body composition. So a drop in performance is not great because it means that we're being under repaired essentially, or we're doing too much. So protein, carbohydrates, and then we've got fats. Fats are really important for our steroidal hormonal health. That's where we help synthesize our hormones, which is really important, again, if we're looking at building muscle. And so one of those macronutrients always kind of gets like left behind. And I think it's really important to look at the benefits of what each of those macronutrients gives us. And then how do we get a balanced approach to those macronutrients to build a diet that we enjoy eating. So I often refer to like a diet as your nutrition philosophy, which is not just what you eat, but how you like to eat. And then you can kind of tailor that to whatever methodology that you want without neglecting the importance of what each macronutrient does for your body.
Yeah, and I think having that understanding will also help you actually like be more excited to eat it. Like that's why people are so scared of carbohydrates and fat, because it's like they don't really know what it does. So then it's like, oh, fat makes you fat, or like, carbs make you bloated, and then that's kind of like all it is, but they don't understand like the positives of it because there's so much negativity of it that
fear-mongering.
That people are aware of. Last question, it's kind of like 3 questions in one, bit of a closing tradition. One thing you do every day, kind of like to get better for yourself, for your mental health, for your physical health, whatever one you want to share. One book that has changed your life or that has made you better, and a quote.
I write every day. Write and walk in the morning, get sun on my skin, and time away from my phone first thing in the morning. That's very important for my mental and spiritual health.
Is this all done? It's kind of like a morning routine?
It's morning routine, yeah. I got to sort myself out before I sort other people out.
Yeah, I love it. That's good.
Second question was?
A book.
A book. God, I've read so many good ones. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, The Obstacle is the Way, The Mountain is You. They're probably the first three that I think of. Yeah.
And what did you take from Obstacle is the Way? Because I've read that too. And that I read that at a time where I actually went broke.
Is this the obstacle?
I was like, this is super timely. I was like, this is a big obstacle.
Yeah.
It was like 2020. And I decided to leave the gym, and I was like invested in this website app, blah, 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 crash and burn. And then I had to like rebuild myself from there. And I read that, and I was like, the only thing I really took away was the title. But like, you know, the obstacle is the way. I was like, this is not what I wanted to happen, but this is what I'm going through, and I'm going to make this like a learning point for my life.
Yeah.
And obviously all the stuff in between, which I've completely forgotten now, but that I was reading that at the time, and it really got me through it.
Yeah.
But what did you take away from it?
It was a shift in perspective. It's like, how do we actually see every obstacle as an opportunity to grow, learn, pivot? And just hearing, you know, I love hearing other people's experiences. It's like, okay, I'm not the only one. And it's such a short, easy, sweet book. And because I feel like books are very healing, and we take what we need from them. And I just felt like that in that moment was the right book that I needed to pivot and create confidence in myself that I can do hard things.
A quote.
Nothing in life comes for free. And I remember my dad said that to me when I was 16, and I was like, whatever, Dad, I just got this for free. But I take it now to the things that we want in life, whether that be freedom in our body, freedom in financials, the career, the relationship that we want. Everything that we want in life requires work. And we should work hard to work hard, because there's pride in working hard, and we can learn so much about ourselves when we actually lean into discomfort.
Big fan of that. Well, thanks for coming on, Hattie.
Thanks,
We'll
Brock.
wrap it up there. It's been great to hear. For me personally, I've been at a seminar that you've run. I've seen you train. Like I kind of know that hard work Hattie side. It's nice to see the, let's say, softer side, like more emotional side, which is really cool. Because in fitness, it's, you know, it's muscle and protein and train hard and, you know, morning routines and all that kind of stuff. But it's nice to see the, like, number one, the passionate side around training. I feel like when we really switched gears and talked about that, you came alive. And I love talking about that stuff too. I could chop that up all day. But it's really cool to see that. But yeah, the softer side, like in terms of emotions, attitude, mindset. I know you, and we're talking about this before the podcast, but you love, you know, like writing, captions and things like that. And even though online, I feel like they don't get appreciated as much, it's nice to kind of get that side. And I think in long form content like this podcast, people can really understand who you are instead of just this person that's like achieved this incredible transformation, world champ, great glutes, great body, you know, awesome person. But now they actually kind of, I guess, can relate to you on a deeper level, because sometimes it's like, oh, that's Hattie, you know, she's this world champion and I'm just this person, when it's cool. And like, you know, I definitely saw you as that when I first saw you training at Tony's gym. I was like, oh man, look at that intensity. You know, I was like, look at that unilateral drop set.
Yeah,
that's
literally.
crazy. And Tony's sitting there like this. Yeah. Oh, no, he more stands there like this.
Yeah,
just like from
one,
afar, super
2.
quiet. Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
That's
well done.
good. Nice.
2-minute rest.
Walk away. But yeah, it's been really awesome to chop it up. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.